In 1977, a modest council house in Enfield, North London, became the epicenter of one of the world's most documented paranormal cases, the Enfield Poltergeist. It was in this house, a small, humble home on Green Street, where the Hodgson family lived, a single mother, Peggy Hodgson, and her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. Peggy was doing her best to raise her children on her own, often struggling to make ends meet. Their home was a typical post-war council house, with simple furnishings and a cozy, if slightly cramped, layout. This was a safe haven for the family, a quiet place, or so they thought, that provided shelter from the challenges of daily life. But in the summer of 1977, this place of refuge would become a house of terror.
So what was the first time something strange happened in this house?
Me and my brother, we were sitting down to bed one evening and we could hear this shuffling noise. And Mum coming because she could hear us shouting and screaming. And we said that the chest of drawers was moving towards the bedroom door. So she said, "Oh, don't be silly," but she see it move for herself. And then at one point she couldn't push it back. And then she got quite upset and said, "Right, everyone downstairs."
Well, you went to get a neighbour, didn't you?
That's right. Yes.
Vic Nottingham was the neighbour who was a builder.
That's right.
Janet Hodgson was just 11 years old when the disturbances began. She and her siblings would hear unexplained bangs, see furniture moving on its own, and feel as though something unseen was always watching. For months, the family endured these terrifying events with little support or understanding from the outside world. Living in a house plagued by such activity was deeply unsettling. The children were reluctant to sleep alone and often huddled together in the same room for comfort. Peggy, feeling helpless, did her best to reassure them, but the haunting took its toll. Neighbors and friends, though supportive, were wary of visiting, and eventually, the Hodgson family found themselves somewhat isolated, alone with their experiences in the house. Despite the skeptics, for the Hodgsons, the haunting was no prank or fabrication. It was a daily ordeal that disrupted their lives in every possible way. Their once safe and quiet home became a place of fear, and the family, especially Janet. The Hodgson family recorded as much of the activity as they could, documenting evidence that would eventually captivate a nation. Furniture slid across the floor without cause, doors slammed, and toys would fly through the air. Though the footage was raw and often unclear, it still provided chilling glimpses of something unseen terrorizing the family.
And we was all just standing in the kitchen, all of us together. And then all of a sudden a pool of water come from nowhere, in the middle of the floor in the kitchen. And then we heard the toilet chain pull. And there was no one at all out in the toilet, we was all in the kitchen. And the door opened in the toilet, then the chain went, and as we walked out there, the toilet brush came from the thing what it was in, the container, and the brush just come up and settled on top of the toilet.
When the disturbances in the Hodgson household first escalated, Peggy Hodgson, overwhelmed and desperate, reached out to the police. Skeptical but obligated to investigate, officers arrived at 284 Green Street, expecting a standard domestic call. What they encountered that night, however, would shake their understanding of what they deemed possible and leave them questioning the nature of reality itself.
It came off the floor, or nearly a half inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
When paranormal investigators Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair first arrived at the Hodgson home, they were prepared for skepticism, expecting to find rational explanations for the strange disturbances reported by the family. Both men were respected members of the Society for Psychical Research, and each had witnessed paranormal activity on previous cases. But what they encountered at 284 Green Street would test their beliefs and push their investigative skills to the limit. Maurice Gross, an inventor-turned-investigator, was one of the first to respond to the Hodgson family's plea for help. He was compassionate, willing to listen, and determined to give the family the benefit of the doubt.
The slipper was thrown across the room and hit the door as I was holding the door.
Determined to find the source of the noise, Gross examined every corner of the room, expecting to find loose plumbing, faulty electrical wiring, or even the natural settling of the old house. Yet everything seemed intact. As he spent more time in the house, Gross witnessed what he described as truly unexplainable phenomena: chairs moving on their own, curtains blowing as if caught in a strong breeze even though the windows were closed, and objects being hurled across rooms as if thrown by an unseen force.
You'll hear here the whistling first of all, and then the barking.
Here is this noise.
But if you can whistle and bark and groan, then you can talk. And I asked it to actually say my name.
Well, just a minute. Right, we'll try again. I want you to call out my name. My complete name. Morris Gross. See if you can do that. Morris.
Now that was the first time we heard the voice, and since then we've been hearing it again and again, and it's been getting louder and louder.
Over time, Playfair became deeply involved in the case, developing a protective attitude toward the family. He saw firsthand the strain it placed on Peggy and her children, and understood how frustrating and isolating it was for them to face public doubt. Even though the activity was terrifying, he believed the family was genuine.
Well, I think this is probably the best case this century. In fact, as far as documentation is concerned, it may be the best case of all time.
When the deep, guttural voice first spoke through Janet, claiming to be Bill Gross and Playfair were cautious yet curious. They questioned the voice repeatedly, trying to catch Janet off guard to see if it could reveal knowledge beyond her experience.
What about the voices? When did the voices start?
December the 12th.
December the 12th?
Yes.
And how did they start?
Well, one night Mr. Gross was talking about it about 8:30. He said, all we need now is the voices to talk. And that night...
Whether it would answer. Is anybody there? Think there's anyone there just now?
Yeah, I do.
Who's that?
What?
Who's that, Janet?
Pardon? Stuart. Sir.
When they asked, the voice replied with chilling simplicity, "I'm Bill. I used to live here, and I died in that chair." This statement alone was shocking to Gross and Playfair. The voice's details about a previous tenant named Bill were later corroborated by neighbors who confirmed that an elderly man by that name had indeed passed away in the house. It was information Janet likely wouldn't have known. As the investigation drew to a close, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair faced the inevitable question: what had truly haunted the Hodgson family? They had documented hours of disturbing phenomena, from eerie voices to objects flying across rooms, and yet definitive answers remained elusive. In their final report, both investigators agreed that the Enfield case defied conventional explanation. They believed the family had endured genuine paranormal activity, something beyond the realm of simple hoaxes or childhood imagination. For Gross, the voice of Bill and his chilling accounts of a past life in the house were enough to convince him that they had witnessed a haunting that science couldn't yet explain. Playfair, while initially skeptical, left the case with a profound sense of respect for the family's suffering and for the mysteries he had personally observed. The Hodgson family gradually returned to a quieter life, though they carried with them memories of those harrowing months. Janet would later reflect on the toll it took on her family, admitting that parts of the experience felt like a blur, but that the memories and the questions surrounding them had stayed with her forever.
She couldn't push it back. And then she got quite upset and said, right, if we run downstairs.
Well, you went to get a neighbour, didn't you?
That's right, yes.
Vic Nottingham was the neighbour who was a builder.
That's...
In the end, the Enfield poltergeist remained a case for the ages, one that, for all its documentation, left open the possibility that there is more to reality than we can see, hear, or even imagine. Gross and Playfair's dedication to the truth turned a suburban haunting into a story that continues to capture imaginations and challenge the boundaries of belief. Whether it was a restless spirit, the family's shared trauma, or something altogether inexplicable. The Enfield poltergeist stands as one of the most mysterious and documented cases of the paranormal, reminding us that some questions may never find answers,